5 years ago, I stood at my parents' front door, drenched in rain, begging for shelter. They closed it in my face without a word. Last week, they broke into my house, the one I built from nothing, and said, "You don't even have a family, we're taking it." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I called the police. My name is Melanie Carter. I was abandoned, betrayed, and left to survive on my own. But I didn't just survive, I rebuilt everything. And when they came back for what I earned, they found out I wasn't the same broken girl they left behind. I grew up in a house where love had conditions and praise was reserved for someone else. My older brother Derek was the golden boy, the pride of Paul and Evelyn Carter. He could do no wrong, even when his report cards showed more C's than A's. Every small accomplishment of his was celebrated with cake, photos, and beaming parents. When he scored a goal in a soccer game, there was a dinner party. When he passed a math test, there was a weekend trip. But when I, Melanie, brought home straight A's and won first place in a county-wide art competition, I got a nod. Maybe a good job, if my mum remembered. From a young age, I knew the score. Derek was their investment. I was there. Not unloved, but unprioritised. When I said I wanted to become an artist, my mother scoffed. "You'll starve," she said, folding laundry without even looking up. My father didn't bother hiding his disdain. Art is for rich kids with trust funds, not daughters of hard-working people. I tried to meet their expectations, but every time I picked up a pencil or opened my sketchbook, I felt alive. My high school art teacher once said I had an eye for design that couldn't be taught. That stayed with me. In secret, I started researching graphic design. How it was evolving with technology. How I could build a career with it. I'd sit at the library for hours, sketching ideas for brands that didn't exist yet, logos for businesses I imagined. None of that mattered at home. In junior year, I finally worked up the courage to tell my parents I wanted to study design in college. My mother didn't blink. "You'll go to nursing school, it's stable, you'll always have work." My father added, "You're not wasting our money on an art degree. If you want to play with colours, do it on your own dime." They made the choice for me. Applications were filled out for nursing programs without asking. I was told where I'd go and what I'd do. My feelings weren't part of the equation. Derek, meanwhile, was off to a business school in another state, fully funded by my parents, complete with a new car and an apartment deposit. "He has potential," they said proudly, as if I didn't. If it weren't for Grandma Helen, I think I would have gone mad. She lived in a cosy, creaky house with a garden that always smelled like lavender and tomatoes. Every summer since I was 10, she let me stay with her for a few weeks. Those visits were the only time I ever felt seen. Grandma Helen didn't care about grades or practical careers. She cared about me. When I showed her my designs, she lit up. "You have vision, Melanie," she'd say, gently tracing the edge of my sketch pad. "And a woman with vision, she's unstoppable. If she believes in herself, more than others doubt her." She told me stories of how she raised 3 children alone after Grandpa died, working as a seamstress and never depending on anyone. "Your mother didn't always see things this way," she whispered one night over tea. "Somewhere along the way, she forgot what it means to dream without fear." That summer before senior year, I made a promise to myself. If no one else believed in me, I'd still go after what I loved, even if I had to do it alone. But I wasn't alone. Grandma Helen pressed a check into my hand the night before I left. "It's not much, but it's a start," she said. "This isn't for rent or bills. This is for art, for your future." I cried in her kitchen that night, overwhelmed by the simple, radical act of someone choosing me. I kept that cheque from Grandma Helen folded in a notebook like a secret oath. It wasn't a lot, just enough for a semester's worth of art supplies or a few classes at community college, but it meant the world to me. It meant someone saw me, believed in me. But reality had a cruel sense of timing. Just weeks before graduation, I overheard my parents arguing in the kitchen late one night. I had gotten up to grab water but stopped when I heard my name. "You shouldn't have touched that money, Paul," my mother said, her voice sharp and low. "It was meant for Melanie." "And what, Evelyn? Let her blow it on some graphic design fantasy? Derek needed that laptop for school. He has a real future." I froze behind the hallway wall, the glass shaking slightly in my hand. "She's going to find out," my mother hissed. "Helen asked me if we'd used it for her tuition yet. I lied to her." "She won't ask again," my father muttered, "and even if she does, she'll forget." She's getting older. I stood there, breath caught in my throat. My parents had taken the money Grandma gave them for me, for my future, and used it for Derek. They never told me. They never even considered asking. To them, it was obvious that my dreams didn't deserve funding. My brother's business degree, on the other hand, was worth every cent. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It settled in slowly, like a storm cloud building across a horizon. I had always known I was treated differently, but this was theft. A decision made behind closed doors that erased my chances before I ever had them. When I confronted them the next morning, my father didn't deny it. "We did what was best for the family," he said with that same tone he used whenever he wanted to end a conversation. "Derek needed help more than you did." "And what about me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Did you ever think maybe I needed help too?" "You're smart. You'll figure it out," my mother said without looking up from her coffee. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked out. I took the bus to Grandma Helen's house and sat in her garden for an hour before I knocked. She opened the door, saw my face, and pulled me in without a word. I told her everything, every word I had overheard, every small moment that now clicked into place. She sat silently, her hands folded in her lap, eyes glassy with pain. "I trusted them," she whispered. "I gave them that money so you could choose your own path, not so they could reroute it for Derek." I could see the heartbreak in her face, less for the money and more for the realization that her own daughter had betrayed not just her, but me. The generational fracture sat heavy in that room. Grandma Helen reached for her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "They won't know about this one," she said. "It's not much, but I had a feeling I might need to prepare a plan B." Inside was a bank check, enough to pay for my first year at community college, enough to buy me time. Options. "I should have known better," she said, her voice steady now. "That's why I'm going to fix this, not just with money, but with something they can't touch. You'll have your chance, Melanie. You just have to keep fighting." In that moment, I stopped hoping for my parents' approval. I stopped waiting for them to change, to love me the way I wanted. Something inside me hardened, not bitterness, but clarity. This was the family I had, but I would build my own future, my own identity, outside of their reach. And someday when they came back, if they came back, I'd be ready. I left home for college with 2 suitcases, a folder of sketches, and a determination that outweighed my fear. The school wasn't prestigious, just a local community college with a decent design program, but it was mine. I had gotten there not with my parents' money, but with Grandma Helen's support and my own stubborn resolve. Renting a room in a shared apartment with 2 other girls meant I had just enough money for utilities, ramen noodles, and bus fare. To make it work, I juggled 2 part-time jobs, mornings at a coffee shop and evenings at a bookstore downtown. My feet hurt constantly. My back ached from standing. But every time I sat in front of a computer and opened a design program, I felt alive again. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents deteriorated into silence. After I left, there were no check-ins, no birthday calls, not even emails. They had cut me off completely and cleanly, as if I'd never existed outside the role they'd scripted for me. At first, it hurt deeply. I remember walking home after a long shift one night, exhausted and soaked from unexpected rain, staring at my phone and wondering what it would take for them to call. But they didn't, and eventually I stopped waiting. The only person who did reach out was Grandma Helen. Like clockwork, she called every Sunday afternoon. At first, we talked about classes and assignments, then about grocery store deals and weather. Eventually, those conversations became a lifeline. She never pried, but she always knew when I needed encouragement. "You sound tired, darling," she'd say gently. "I'm fine," I'd reply, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You're more than fine," she'd respond. "You're building something real. Don't let the noise from the past drown out your own voice." Her belief in me became a quiet engine that kept me going when everything else felt like too much. And there were many days like that. Days when assignments piled up, shifts ran long, and my body ached from stress and sleep deprivation. I remember falling asleep once on a library desk with my sketchpad open beneath me, only to be woken up by the closing bell. Still, I pushed forward. I made it through my first year with a GPA high enough to secure a partial scholarship for the next semester. That helped lighten the load, but I still needed to work constantly just to stay afloat. I learned to budget with surgical precision, counting coins at grocery store checkouts, tracking every dollar in a battered notebook I carried in my backpack. My parents knew none of this. I doubted they cared. Derek, on the other hand, was thriving, or so I heard through Grandma Helen. He had graduated with honours in business and landed a job at a financial firm, complete with a new car and a condo in the city. At one point, Grandma slipped and mentioned that Evelyn had shown off Derek's business card to a neighbour. I bit my tongue. Of course she did. Her pride in him was unwavering, even as her silence toward me stayed firm. Still, the anger I once felt began to dull, not into forgiveness, but into understanding. They had chosen who they wanted to invest in, and it wasn't me. That realization, painful as it was, freed me in a strange way. If I could survive without their support, I could succeed without their approval. I was 2 semesters in when my design professor pulled me aside after class one day. "Melanie," he said, "you've got something. A clarity of vision most students don't find until their senior year." He encouraged me to submit my work to a statewide competition for emerging designers. I hesitated at first, unsure if I could afford the entry fee. But Grandma Helen insisted on covering it. "You've got to show them," she said. "Let the world see what I already know." The competition came and went, and though I didn't win, I placed in the top 10, enough to get a small mention in a local design journal. My professor beamed with pride. Grandma Helen mailed 3 copies to her friends, but the high didn't last. By my 3rd semester, the constant grind was catching up to me. I was working over 30 hours a week, taking 5 courses, and still trying to build a portfolio strong enough to transfer to a 4-year university. Sleep became optional. Meals became vending machine granola bars. My body felt like it was operating on emergency reserves. One cold January afternoon, everything collapsed. I was shelving books during a shift at the bookstore when my vision blurred. My knees buckled. I woke up under the harsh lights of the ER, an IV in my arm, and a nurse asking if I knew my name. I had collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration. The doctor told me it wasn't unusual for students with my workload to push too hard, too far. "You're not a machine," he said, "but your body will treat you like one until it doesn't." I lay in that bed for hours, too tired to cry, too numb to even think clearly. Then I heard it, my parents' voices outside the curtain. I couldn't believe it. The hospital must have called my emergency contact. My parents were still listed. For a fleeting moment, my heart fluttered. Maybe they'd finally come for me, but the hope died quickly. "She doesn't have insurance?" My father's voice was clipped, irritated. "No," a nurse replied. "She opted out. Many students do. It's expensive." There was a pause. "So who's paying for this?" my mother asked, her voice cold. I held my breath, waiting to hear concern, even just a sliver of it. "Well," the nurse said gently, "we'll work out a payment plan. The important thing is—" "Let's go," my father cut in. "We can't take this on right now." Footsteps. The curtain never opened. They never even checked if I was awake. I lay there staring at the ceiling, something in me shattering. Not for the first time, but this time it felt final. I wasn't just unsupported, I was invisible. The next morning, after being discharged and limping home with a cab voucher from the social worker, I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by textbooks and bills. I stared at my student portal, hovering over the withdraw button. Maybe this was the sign. Maybe they were right all along. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. But before I could click, I noticed an envelope sticking out of my backpack. I didn't remember packing it. My name was written in Grandma Helen's loopy script. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Melanie, I know things are hard right now. I feel it in my bones, the way only a grandmother can. But hard doesn't mean hopeless. You were born with a fire that no one, no silence, no betrayal, no failure can extinguish. If you need to rest, rest. If you need to cry, cry. But don't stop. They tried to clip your wings, baby girl. That's why you're going to fly. Love always and forever, Grandma Helen." The paper blurred as tears poured down my face. I clutched that letter like it was a life preserver, and in a way, it was. I didn't drop out. Instead, I dropped one shift at the bookstore, picked up a freelance logo design gig from a community board posting, and started walking instead of taking the bus to save money. It wasn't easy. But nothing about my life had ever been easy. The difference now was that I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I was chasing my own worth. One letter had reminded me of that. One woman had believed in me so deeply. She saw my future even when I couldn't, and that made all the difference. By the time I transferred to a state university to finish my bachelor's in graphic design, things were finally beginning to look up. I had moved into a small apartment in Philadelphia, split with 2 roommates, and landed an internship at a mid-sized marketing studio. The office was tucked between a thrift store and a bagel shop, and I loved everything about it. The buzz of the creative team, the messy whiteboards, the long nights polishing client decks with the glow of neon signs outside. The internship turned into a junior designer position 6 months before graduation. The salary wasn't huge, but it covered rent and groceries, and more importantly, it gave me purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving. I was building. Even my parents couldn't ignore my success. Though they never called, I got a birthday card one year, just a generic one with their names printed, no message. It felt more like a receipt than a gesture, but still, a small part of me hoped maybe this meant they were proud. Rachel Morgan, a senior designer at the studio, took me under her wing. She was sharp, funny, and intimidating in the best way. The kind of woman who could walk into a client meeting in jeans and command the room with one well-placed line. She liked my work, said I had clean instincts and dirty guts, her way of complimenting my bold composition choices. We weren't close at first, just co-workers who grabbed coffee or traded project files. But that would change. Then the recession hit. It started with smaller clients backing out. Then came the memo, hiring freeze. Then, in a single Thursday morning meeting, we were told the agency had lost 2 of its major contracts. They were closing in 2 weeks, effective immediately. I remember sitting at my desk, numb, watching the email notification with the subject line, "Final pay stub." It felt like the floor had disappeared. In just 3 months, I burned through my emergency savings, trying to cover rent and bills. Freelance jobs were scarce. Every designer I knew was struggling. Clients were tightening budgets or ghosting altogether. I applied everywhere, from creative agencies to local print shops. No bites. When one of my roommates lost her barista job, she moved out. The other left shortly after to live with her boyfriend. I was suddenly alone in a 2-bedroom apartment I couldn't afford. I sold my nicer furniture, downgraded my phone plan, and applied for grocery assistance. Every day felt like a blur of emails, applications, and rejection. Finally, I did what I had sworn I never would. I called home. It rang 4 times before my mother picked up. "Hello?" she said, like she didn't recognize the number. "It's me," I said quietly. "Melanie." There was a pause, then, "Oh, I lost my job. I'm trying to stay afloat, but it's been hard. I just need a little help. A place to stay, maybe, just until I find work again." Silence stretched across the line. "You chose this path, Melanie." My father's voice suddenly cut in. He'd taken the phone. "We warned you about unstable careers." "I have interviews," I whispered. "I just need time." "We're still paying off Derek's MBA," my mother chimed in. "You made your bed," my father added. "Now lie in it." The line went dead. I sat on the floor of my emptying apartment, phone in my lap, air punched from my lungs. There was no safety net, no family to catch me, just me. Again. I didn't know where to go. I was days away from eviction, and I hadn't eaten a full meal in 2. That night, I went to a coffee shop just to sit inside somewhere warm. I ordered the cheapest tea and nursed it for hours, using their Wi-Fi to send out another round of resumes. That's when I heard someone say my name. Melanie Carter." I turned and saw Rachel. Rachel looked exactly how I remembered. Sleek coat, bright lipstick, that same air of quiet confidence. For a second, I wanted to melt into the floor. My oversized hoodie and greasy hair were a stark contrast to her polish. I hadn't washed my clothes properly in a week. I couldn't afford to. "I thought that was you," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Her eyes flicked to my laptop, then back to me. "How have you been?" I tried to smile. "Freelancing, mostly." She looked at me for a long moment, not judging, just seeing. "Really?" she asked gently, "because you look like someone who hasn't eaten today." That was the thing about Rachel. She never beat around the bush. I hesitated, then nodded. There was no point pretending anymore. Her expression softened. "Why didn't you reach out?" "I didn't want anyone to know how bad it got," I said quietly. "Everyone else landed on their feet. I didn't. Everyone struggled, she said. Trust me, I barely held on myself. But I always thought you were the one to watch. That surprised me. Rachel glanced around, then said, "Come with me." I blinked. What? "Grab your stuff," she said. "You're not staying here another night." I hesitated. "Rachel, you don't have to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." The next hour was a blur. She drove me to her apartment, clean, warm, filled with books and art. She made grilled cheese sandwiches and insisted I take a long shower. When I came out, there were clean clothes folded on the bed and a fresh towel waiting. I hadn't slept in a real bed in weeks. That night I did, and I cried into the pillow until I couldn't anymore. The next morning, she handed me coffee and asked, "What's the plan?" I didn't have one. But I did have something I was too ashamed to admit. I was going to sell my tablet, I mumbled, eyes cast down. "It's the only real gear I've got left." Rachel frowned. "The Wacom? You're kidding?" I was desperate. "Don't you dare," she said firmly. "That's your brain in digital form." "It's all I had of value." She shook her head. "You're of value, not your equipment." I sat in silence, the words hitting deeper than I expected. Then slowly Rachel admitted something I never saw coming. "You know," she said, "when you first joined the studio, I was jealous of you." I blinked. "Jealous? Of me?" "You had raw talent," she said. "You were fearless with your concepts. I worked hard to be good. Clean lines, proper form. But you had guts. It annoyed me at first, made me feel replaceable." I stared at her, stunned. "But watching you fight like this, Melanie, no one fights this hard for a future they don't believe in. And that deserves respect." She paused, then added, "Ethan, my boyfriend, runs a small dev studio. They need design help. It's not glamorous, but it's remote and steady. Want me to set up a meeting?" I could barely speak. I nodded, tears welling again. "Good," she said. "Now eat your damn breakfast." That day was the first time in months I felt human again. In the span of 48 hours, I had gone from preparing to sell the last piece of my creative soul to being given a second chance. Not just at work, but at connection, at dignity. Rachel had once been a mentor, a colleague, but now she was something more. A reminder that not all people walk away when things get ugly. Some show up, some stay. Just as I began to feel like I was catching my breath again, life reminded me how fragile that breath could be. 2 weeks into my new remote job with Ethan's design studio, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Nancy, my grandmother's neighbour. Her voice was soft, careful. "Melanie, your grandmother's in the hospital. It's pneumonia. She's asking for you." The world tilted. I hadn't seen Grandma Helen in months, between job loss, survival mode, and trying to keep my head above water. I had only managed short calls and voicemails. Guilt pressed hard against my chest. "I'll come now," I said. Rachel didn't hesitate. She tossed me her car keys and said, "Go. Don't think. Just drive." I made the 3-hour trip in near silence, hands gripping the wheel, praying she'd hold on. When I arrived, Grandma looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, skin pale, breathing shallow, but her eyes lit up the moment they met mine. "My Melanie," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "I'm here, Grandma," I said, tears already spilling. I stayed the night by her side, telling her about my new job, about Rachel, about how her letter had saved me from quitting school. She smiled weakly, eyes twinkling. I always knew you'd make it," she said, "but there's still one more gift." From a small bag on her side table, she pulled a worn envelope and a key. Inside was a copy of her will and a note. "The house is yours," she said. "Always meant for you." "I knew one day you'd need a place to land." I was stunned. "Grandma, you don't have to—" "I already did," she interrupted. "Your mother has Derek, but you have vision, roots. This house is yours. Make it a home." I wept into her hand that night. 2 days later, she passed in her sleep, peaceful, my hand still holding hers. The funeral was small. My parents came, faces tight with grief and awkward silence. My mother cried for show, dabbing her eyes while eyeing the casket. My father looked more irritated than sad. They didn't ask where I'd been or how I was doing. They didn't even acknowledge the will, but I saw the flicker in their eyes when the lawyer read it aloud. The house, all of it, left solely to me. My father's mouth tightened. My mother's tears dried quickly. "She always favoured you," she muttered under her breath. I said nothing. In the weeks that followed, I moved into Grandma's cottage, a quaint, ageing house with peeling paint and a wild garden that still smelled faintly of tomatoes and basil. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I had a roof over my head that no one could take away. Rachel came for a weekend to help me clean and unpack. We scrubbed walls, pulled weeds, and rearranged furniture. "It has good bones," she said, "and soul, you can feel it." I set up a small workspace in the front room, right by the window that looked out onto the overgrown flower beds. That's where I put Grandma's letter, framed next to my sketchbook. Every day I worked from that spot, designing, emailing clients, drinking tea in her old chipped mug. And every night I slept in her bed, wrapped in her handmade quilt, feeling more grounded than I had in years. I still missed her fiercely, but her presence lingered in the house, soft, steady, reassuring. For the first time, I wasn't chasing something, I was building. It started with a loose floorboard in the back hallway. I wasn't looking for anything, just chasing a persistent creak that made the house sound like it sighed every time I walked past. But when I lifted the board, I found a small, weathered wooden box tucked beneath the beams. Inside were several old photographs, a faded lace handkerchief, and a leather-bound journal with H. Carter engraved on the cover. Grandma Helen. I carried it carefully to the living room, sat by the window, and began to read. The first few entries were dated nearly 2 decades ago, simple reflections on gardening, recipes she wanted to try, letters she never sent. But as the years progressed, the tone shifted. They became less about her life and more about mine. Melanie is 7 today, quiet, curious. She watches people like she's sketching them in her mind. Evelyn brushes it off, calls her shy, but I see something more. That girl sees everything. Another entry. Derek broke a window today and blamed it on Melanie. Paul believed him instantly. Evelyn didn't even ask. Melanie cried in the garden, thinking no one noticed. But I did. I always will. I had to pause then. The tears came quickly, sharp and hot. My grandmother had seen all of it, the slights, the indifference, the slow erosion of my place in the family. And she had written it down, like someone documenting the unseen. One entry stopped me cold. I gave Evelyn the money today, told her it was for Melanie's tuition, whatever she wanted to study. She smiled and nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. I worry she'll find a way to funnel it to Derek. I want to believe she wouldn't do that to her own daughter. But I've raised Evelyn. I know her patterns. Melanie has a storm inside her, part pain, part fire. One day that fire will carry her further than any of us could dream, but I fear her mother's silence will wound her deeper than words ever could. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest, overcome. Grandma hadn't just prepared a will. She had built a safeguard, a place, a plan for me. She had seen the betrayal coming long before I could, and instead of trying to change it, she had prepared for the aftermath. She had quietly constructed a soft place for me to land, an emotional bunker, a legacy not of money, but of foresight and fierce, unwavering love. Reading those pages felt like having her beside me again, like hearing her voice guide me through shadows with a lantern of truth. That night, I sat in the garden, the journal open on my lap, stars blinking overhead. I could almost hear her humming as she used to when pruning the tomatoes. I whispered, "You knew, didn't you?" The breeze shifted, soft and warm. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I believed in presence, in love that lingered past death, in the way certain souls leave handprints on the walls of your life that never fade. This house, her house, wasn't just wood and roof. It was her final act of rebellion against a broken family system. It was her final act of faith in me. I spent the next week transforming the guest room into a study. Her journal now sat on a shelf above my desk, next to her favourite gardening book. I planted lavender by the front door, just like she had, and every morning before opening my laptop, I lit a small candle beneath her photo and said, "Thank you," because she didn't just leave me a home. She left me proof that I was never as alone as I thought. 5 years had passed since I moved into Grandma Helen's cottage, and my life had finally taken root. Elevation Designs, my small, scrappy design studio, had grown beyond anything I imagined. From a desk in the front room, I now managed a team of 3 and service clients across 3 states. The garage had been renovated into a proper studio space. The garden had become a vibrant jungle of lavender, tomatoes, and wildflowers. And my heart, so long starved for safety, was beginning to bloom too. Logan, the local bookstore owner, had gradually become more than just a neighbour and friend. We shared coffee, ideas, and eventually weekends. He never asked for pieces of me I wasn't ready to give. He just showed up, consistently, kindly. It was a life of peace, of self-made joy, until the email came. Subject, touching base, dear Melanie. It was from Derek. I stared at the screen for a long time, my coffee cooling beside me. Hey sis, it's been a while. I came across your website. Very impressive work. Mum and Dad mentioned they hadn't heard from you in years and were worried. Hope you're well. Let's catch up soon. Derek. No acknowledgement of the years of silence, no apology, just a fake breezy tone that felt more like a salesman than a brother. I didn't reply. 3 days later, my phone rang. Mum and Dad, flashing across the screen. Instinctively, I picked up. "Melanie, darling," my mother said, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's so good to hear your voice." I blinked, stunned. "Mum, I wasn't expecting this." "Well, your brother said you've been doing so well. We looked up your website. It's just beautiful. Your father and I were saying how proud we are of what you've built." The words should have warmed me, but they didn't. They slid off like oil. "That's unexpected," I said. "Well," she continued, "we thought maybe it's time to reconnect. Let bygones be bygones. We'd love to come visit, see the place. Just get to know this part of your life." There it was. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said I'd think about it. That weekend, Logan and I walked the garden paths in silence. "They're not just dropping in for hugs," he said finally. "I know," I said, "but I want to see what they're really after." So I agreed to a short lunch visit, nothing overnight, just a polite 2-hour window. They arrived late, Derek in a sharp blazer, my father looking thinner, my mother with her usual forced smile. They brought a pie I didn't trust and compliments that felt rehearsed. "You've done wonders with the place," my mother said, eyes scanning the furniture. "It's beautiful," Derek added, his gaze lingering a little too long on the framed deed above the fireplace. Lunch was filled with catching up that danced around the truth. They spoke vaguely about hard times, Dad's early retirement, Derek's market fluctuations, Mom's back issues. Then came the probing questions. "What's the heating like here?" Dad asked. "Must be a lot of upkeep," Mum said, eyeing the hardwood floors. "You ever think about selling?" Derek offered casually. I shook my head. "This is home. I'm not going anywhere." My father smiled tightly. Of course. They left soon after, but I noticed Derek taking pictures on his phone before getting in the car. Later that night, Logan turned to me on the porch swing. "They're planning something." "I know," I said, "and I have a feeling lunch was just the first move." A week after the visit, I received an invitation to speak at a regional design conference in Boston. It was a great opportunity to connect with clients and elevate my studio's visibility. I hesitated for a moment, remembering the way Derek had glanced at the deed. But logic overruled instinct. They wouldn't. Would they? I prepared carefully, locked the doors, asked Logan to swing by once or twice, set up alerts on the security camera app connected to my phone, then I left. The conference was lively and inspiring. I met other designers, collected business cards, and even landed a tentative partnership with a boutique agency from New York. For the first time in a long time, I felt fully seen by people who respected what I'd built. On the second night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mrs. Jenkins, Grandma Helen's neighbour. "Thought you weren't back until tomorrow. Saw lights on in your house. People moving around. Everything okay?" My stomach dropped. I called her immediately. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm still in Boston," I said. "No one should be in that house." "Oh dear," she murmured. "Should I call the police?" "No. Let me check my security cams first. I'll call you back." With shaking hands, I opened the app. There, in black and white clarity, was my father's car in the driveway, then Derek's, and then my father at the back door, using something to force the lock. Within minutes, they were inside, dragging in suitcases. I stared in stunned silence. They had planned this. I called Logan. "They broke in," I said, voice trembling. "They're in my house." "I'm on my way," he said. "Want me to call the cops?" "Not yet. Let me try them first." I called my father's phone. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I tried Derek. Same thing. Finally, I dialed the landline. "Wilson Residence," Derek answered casually. "Excuse me?" I said, stunned. He sighed. "Melanie, we were going to call you tomorrow. Just getting settled in." "You broke into my house." He paused. "Let's not be dramatic. It's a family home. We're family." "No, you're trespassing. You need to leave." My father's voice came in the background. "Tell her we'll discuss it when she returns. The decision's been made." "Get out," I snapped, "or I'm calling the police." Derek's tone hardened. "That would be a mistake. We've spoken to a lawyer. Grandma wasn't in her right mind when she changed that will. There's a case here." My blood ran cold. "You're bluffing." "We'll see," he said. I hung up and immediately changed my flight to return home the next morning. Logan picked me up from the airport, his face tense. "They're still there," he said. "Your dad told me it's a private family matter," when I tried to talk to him. When we arrived at the house, I almost didn't recognize it. My mother's throw pillows were on the porch swing. Derek's gym bag sat on the stoop. Inside, the living room had been rearranged, their coats hung by the door. My father emerged from my bedroom with a box of his clothes. My mother came from the kitchen. "You're early," she said, as if I were the one intruding. "I live here," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be," my father said. "You've had this house to yourself for long enough. We're family. This is my home. Grandma left it to me." "She wasn't well," Derek said from the stairs, phone in hand. "We have a lawyer. You'll hear from him." I looked to the mantel. The deed was gone. "You took my paperwork?" "Just making copies," he said with a smile that chilled me. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I turned, stepped outside, and called the police. "Hello," I said, as my fingers trembled. "I need to report a break-in." 15 minutes after I called 911, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of the cottage. Their lights were silent but pulsing, casting eerie reflections against the windows that no longer felt like mine. Logan stood beside me, his arm gently brushing mine, grounding me as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The officers approached calmly. "Are you the homeowner?" the older one asked. "Yes," I said, handing over my ID and the property deed I'd pulled from my office backup files. Thankfully, I'd scanned everything years ago. "My name's Melanie Carter. These people broke into my house while I was out of town. They don't live here. They have no right to be here." He nodded, eyes scanning the document. "And they're my parents and brother." His partner exchanged a glance with him, then said, "Okay, let's talk to them." Inside, my family sat in the living room as if nothing had happened. My mother was knitting on the couch. My father, reading a newspaper he'd probably brought from his apartment. Derek hovered by the fireplace, looking entirely too smug. The officers entered ahead of me. "Sir, ma'am, we need to speak with you," the lead officer said. "Are you residents of this property?" My father stood, as if ready for a business pitch. "This is our daughter's house. It's a family matter." "That's not what I asked," the officer replied. "Do you live here?" "We're staying here temporarily," my mother said, "just until things settle." "Were you given permission to enter and reside here?" Silence. "She's our daughter," my father repeated, his tone sharpening. "Do you have keys? A lease? Any legal document giving you access?" "No, but—" "Then this is trespassing," the officer cut in. "You need to vacate immediately." "This is absurd," my father snapped. "We're her family." "That doesn't entitle you to break into someone's home." Derek stepped forward. "We're challenging the will. The house shouldn't be hers. Grandma was confused." "That's a legal matter," the officer interrupted again. "Until a court says otherwise, this is Melanie Carter's home. You can't be here without her consent." My mother looked at me, tears forming instantly. "Melanie, how could you do this to us?" "How could I?" I replied, voice shaking. "You broke into my home, you rearranged my things, you erased my presence, and now you're acting like I'm the villain?" "You're our daughter," she whispered. "And you turned your back on me the second I needed you," I said. "Family doesn't do that. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't manipulate." My father's jaw clenched. "You always were ungrateful." "No," I said, standing straighter. "I just stopped letting you decide who I'm supposed to be." The officers allowed them 30 minutes to pack essentials. The rest, they said, could be retrieved later with written notice. Logan and I waited on the porch while they gathered their things in angry silence. Derek passed me on the way out, suitcase in hand. "This isn't over," he muttered. "We'll see you in court." "Bring it," I said, staring him down. "And don't forget, I have cameras." His smirk faltered. When they were gone, the officers asked if I'd like to press charges for forced entry. I declined for now, but I requested a formal report in case the legal battle ahead required it. That night, Logan helped me change the locks. We installed new deadbolts and reinforced the windows. He set up an additional camera facing the back gate and updated the motion sensors. "I can't believe they actually did it," I whispered as we sat in the garden. Exhausted. "I can," Logan said quietly. "People like that, when they can't control you, they try to consume you." The house was quiet again, but something inside me had shifted. They'd crossed a line I hadn't even known I'd drawn, and now I was done playing nice. The next morning, I received an email from Officer Navarro, the one who handled the call. Attached were 2 PDFs, the official incident report, and a copy of his notes on the encounter. I read through them slowly, heart pounding with a mix of relief and lingering disbelief. My parents had actually tried to paint themselves as victims, of all things. According to the officer's report, my mother had cried to them during the eviction. "She's not well," she had said. "She's always been unstable, emotional. We're just here to help." My father doubled down, claiming they had been invited weeks ago and that I had changed my mind, suddenly out of spite. "She's punishing us," he reportedly said, "for being concerned, for trying to protect the house." Derek? He claimed that I had been neglecting the property and that the family had a moral obligation to reclaim what was rightfully part of our generational legacy. I slammed the laptop shut. They were trying to rewrite history again, like they had done all my life, but this time I had proof. I logged into my security system's cloud server and downloaded the footage. The moment my father forced open the back door with a crowbar, the suitcases being hauled in, my mother hanging her scarf on the hallway hook. Derek, smirking as he walked through my study like he owned it. Crystal clear, date and time stamped. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. "Beautiful," she wrote back. "They don't have a leg to stand on." And still, that wasn't the end of it. Later that afternoon, I received a formal letter from a law office, one I'd never heard of, representing Paul, Evelyn, and Derek Carter. It claimed that Grandma Helen had been under mental duress and cognitive decline at the time of her will amendment, and therefore the property's deed was contested pending judicial review. I nearly laughed, then I cried, then I got angry, because after everything, after abandoning me, stealing from me, humiliating me, they were still trying to take what wasn't theirs. Still trying to gaslight reality, Logan stood behind me as I read the letter aloud, his hands gently resting on my shoulders. "You're not fighting them alone," he said softly. The next few days were a blur of legal prep. My lawyer, Vanessa, was a powerhouse, sharp, thorough, and deeply unimpressed with their tactics. "They're banking on you being too emotionally worn down to fight," she said during our first video call. "Let's show them they underestimated the wrong woman." We compiled everything, Grandma Helen's medical evaluations, which showed her mental clarity right up until her final months. Testimonies from her primary care physician and neighbours. The security footage, the inheritance paperwork. A notarized copy of the journal entry where Grandma wrote explicitly about giving the house to me. Meanwhile, the smear campaign from my family began in full force. Derek posted a vague status on social media. Funny how some people forget where they came from when success hits. My mother sent out group emails to extended relatives, casting herself as the heartbroken mother whose ungrateful daughter locked her parents out of their own family home. But the truth had its own voice, and now I had the receipts. When the preliminary hearing date arrived, I walked into that courtroom, not as a scared girl, trying to defend her worth, but as a woman who had already reclaimed it. Their lawyer tried to argue the usual: questionable mental competence, unfair exclusion from inheritance, familial intent. Vanessa, calm and confident, played the footage of the break-in. Silence filled the courtroom as the judge watched my father jam a crowbar into my back door, watched Derek walk in with a phone in one hand and suitcase in the other. The judge asked only one question. "Do you dispute the authenticity of this footage?" My parents said nothing because they couldn't. The case was dismissed before it even went to trial. As I stepped outside the courthouse, Vanessa turned to me with a grin. "Game, set, match." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Later that night, Logan and I sat in the garden, the scent of fresh basil and summer blooms swirling around us. I told him everything, what they'd said to the cops, what they told the judge, the way they twisted everything to make me look like the villain. "I hate how good they are at pretending," I whispered. "But they couldn't fake the truth," Logan said. "Not this time." He was right. And for the first time in my life, I didn't just feel safe. I felt victorious. In the weeks following the court's decision, a strange stillness settled over my life. Not quiet in the sense of nothingness, but in the way a storm finally passes and the wind calms, leaving behind space to breathe, to rebuild. I had won, legally, definitively, undeniably. The house was mine, say, the garden, the creaky stairs, the dusty attic full of Grandma Helen's secrets, all mine. But more than that, I had reclaimed something deeper, my voice, my boundaries, my right to exist without apology. Vanessa filed a no-contact order the same week the case closed. The court granted it swiftly, citing the forced entry and documented harassment. I sent one final email to my family, short, civil, final. "I do not wish to continue contact. I am no longer available to serve as your scapegoat or your safety net. I wish you peace. Melanie." They never responded. It was done. And in the silence that followed, I found myself thinking not about revenge or closure, but about legacy. Grandma Helen had given me more than shelter. She'd given me a model for quiet, steadfast resilience. She'd seen the cracks in the system long before I ever did. She had raised 3 children on her own and still found room in her heart to protect me when my own parents wouldn't. I wanted to pass that forward. It started small. I converted the room above the garage, formerly my office before Derek tried to claim it, into a livable apartment space. Then I posted on a design school job board, offering a part-time internship with housing included. The responses were overwhelming. I selected a young woman named Jamie, a 22-year-old student in her final year, recently cut off by her parents after she switched majors from business to digital art. She reminded me so much of myself, it was eerie. When she moved in, I gave her the same room I had once sobbed in, terrified and alone. Only this time the walls were freshly painted, the bed was made, and a note waited on the desk. "You are seen. You are safe. You are not alone." Within weeks, Jamie began to blossom. She came to life in staff meetings, her ideas bold and unpolished, but electric. Watching her grow, watching someone who had been abandoned find footing, lit a fire inside me. This couldn't stop with her. So I launched the Helen Carter Foundation. The mission was simple: to support young creatives who had been disowned, displaced, or rejected by their families for choosing a different path. We provided temporary housing, internships, mentorships, and small emergency grants. I funded the first year with my own savings, the next with donations from former clients and friends who'd watched me claw my way out of nothing. Within 2 years, we had 3 interns, 2 satellite housing spaces in nearby towns, and a growing list of alumni who had gone on to open studios, launch brands, or simply find stable footing in a world that had once thrown them away. Logan was there through every step, steady, patient, grounding. After the mess with my family, I expected him to keep his distance, to avoid getting caught in the emotional wake, but he didn't. If anything, he moved closer. One evening, as we sat in the garden, surrounded by the scent of rosemary and wet soil, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. It wasn't flashy, no grand speech, just a soft, simple sentence. "You deserve a family that chooses you every day. I'd be honoured to be part of that." I didn't cry. I laughed. A deep, relieved, joyful laugh that startled even me. "Yes," I said. "God, yes." We married the following spring in the garden where it all began, Grandma Helen's garden, the same place she once taught me how to plant lavender, how to believe in something I couldn't yet see. Rachel was my maid of honour. Jamie walked with me down the aisle. Logan's father, a retired judge with a soft spot for poetry, officiated. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. There were no blood relatives in attendance. But I had never felt more surrounded by family. People often ask me how I found the strength to go through what I did. I always give the same answer. Strength isn't something you find, it's something you build, slowly, painfully, deliberately. Like a garden, like a home. And sometimes when you're lucky, someone passes you the blueprint before you even realise you'll need it. Grandma Helen was my blueprint. Now I pass it to others. About 6 months after the wedding, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a cold legal envelope. A real handwritten letter. The return address on the back was familiar but distant. My mother. I stared at the envelope for a full hour before opening it. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. The paper smelled faintly of old perfume and something floral, like a scent that had long lost its name. "Melanie, I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away. But I hope you don't." I took a deep breath and continued. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, more than I've done in years probably, and I need you to know some things. I was raised by a woman colder than you can imagine. My mother, your grandmother, was not the warm, wise figure Helen was to you. She was cruel, controlling, punishing. When I told her I wanted to become a teacher instead of a nurse, she tore up my applications in front of me and told me to stop dreaming. When I cried, she said I was weak. When I resisted, she said I was ungrateful. So I became what she wanted, out of fear, out of survival. And when I became a mother, I told myself I would do better, but I didn't. I repeated the cycle. I made your path harder because mine had been hard. I feared your independence because I never had any. I watched you walk away and told myself you'd come back begging because that's what I'd been trained to expect. But you didn't. You survived. You thrived. You became everything I wish I had dared to be, and I hated you for it. Not because you failed me, but because you didn't. I am sorry. Not because of guilt or legal consequence or public shame, but because I see you now, and I finally see me. I don't ask for reconciliation. I ask only that you live freely, knowing this. The cycle stops with you. Mum. I folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. There were no grand apologies, no begging for forgiveness, just a quiet confession from a woman who had, for the first time, looked in the mirror and told the truth. And somehow that was enough, not enough to rebuild trust, not enough to call or write back, but enough to release the weight I hadn't even realised I was still carrying. I walked out to the garden and read the letter aloud under the rosemary bush, Grandma Helen's favourite spot. The breeze carried my voice into the sky, and I imagined it sweeping through the branches, into the soil, into the roots of everything she had planted. Then I lit a match and burned the letter, not out of anger, but as ritual, a symbol that some wounds don't need to fester forever. Some can simply close. That night I told Logan about the letter. He didn't ask what I'd do. He just held my hand and said, "You don't owe them anything, but you deserve peace." And peace is what I found. In the months that followed, I expanded the foundation. We added a new initiative, therapy stipends, for those struggling with generational trauma. Jamie led the first workshop. I stood at the back, watching her guide a group of young women through the language of healing. They spoke of anger, of betrayal, of identity, and then slowly of hope. I realised then that healing isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's about release, letting go of needing them to understand, letting go of needing them to be sorry in the right way, letting go of needing anything at all. Because I had enough. I had Logan, I had the house, I had a legacy built on courage, not control. I had chosen family, chosen truth, chosen self. And in the stillness of that garden, surrounded by roots older than pain, I finally understood. Forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about unclipping the anchor from your own soul and walking forward without dragging it behind you anymore.